Hi, thanks a lot for tuning in. My name is Wenhan Sun. I'm from the University of Munich. In mid-April, we launched a large online experiment looking into people's social touch behavior, well-being, and activities under quarantine and social distancing rules. So today I want to show you some of the early results we have obtained from the Chinese cohort. We had over 1,700 participants from over 40 countries in the world. The experiment included various questions about their situations under lockdown, general attitude towards social touch, as well as a few interactive tasks on Imagine Touch and one on heat map. We focused on 5 main cultures based on various levels of contact, and we used these categories for cultural comparisons. We thought the Chinese cohort is especially interesting to look at, since it's the only large non-Western group we have. Here are some details about the Chinese cohort. We had roughly 100 people, mainly from mainland China. Also, for a bit of background, the coronavirus first became known to the public in early January. China started to impose strict state-imposed lockdowns from the 23rd of January, and they lasted until early April. Our experiment went online mid-April. At that time, many people in China had already gone back to work, but some were still under self-quarantine. Meanwhile, in the rest of the world, lockdowns only started in March and they lasted into May. Our Chinese participants were further ahead of the rest into the pandemic in relation to when their local outbreak started. Here's what we found. The Chinese cohort is the only one reporting eating a lot more during quarantine, both in comparison to themselves and to other groups. This could potentially be a reward-seeking behavior, but could also be linked to different food sources. Chinese people would have to cook for themselves, which is not normally necessary. They also reported to be consuming a lot less alcohol, and this may have to do with the fact that alcohol is reserved for social occasions in many Asian countries. The Chinese cohort felt the most lonely, which is not all that surprising given they have been under quarantine for the longest period of time. But very interestingly, they also reported to feel the least sad. We don't entirely understand why this is, but a few educated guesses would be they had more time to mentally process the pandemic and all the tragedies they witnessed, or even to become desensitized. Also, we know Chinese media had largely positive coverage of the pandemic at that time, and since people have just been freed from their long quarantines, there might have been a sense of relief or even triumph. Moving on to social touch, our Chinese participants showed the largest difference in their answers and have in general very negative attitudes towards social touch, as seen from the questionnaires. They do not seek social touch and do not like to be touched by others. We then give them a task of Imagine Touch, where we show them videos of models being touched on the face, back and the forearm. We then asked everyone to imagine being touched the same way and rate that experience based on how pleasant and how vivid it is. As you can see here, for all these 3 areas of the body, our Chinese participants rated the experiences to be a lot less pleasant and a lot less vivid. We also asked how much social touch they received and how much they desired. We chose 4 categories of social touch more specifically: touch on the forearm, on the shoulder, hugs and kisses, and coming from different people, such as their child, parent, partner, and so on. With a few exceptions, our Chinese cohort seemed to have received the least amount of social touch and desired the least amount of social touch. For example, even for family members, the results for hugs and kisses are very negative. Finally, we had a heat map task where participants marked areas of their body where they are comfortable being touched and uncomfortable being touched by different people using different colors. For most areas of the body and different groups of people, the results showed that our Chinese participants were rather more comfortable being touched in comparison to other groups. For example, we have very positive results for the head, groin, arms, and legs. This really goes against what earlier tasks and questions would have predicted. So just a quick recap. Our Chinese cohort had a very negative attitude towards social touch. They found the imagined social touch to be a lot less pleasant and less vivid. They received and desired a lot less social touch, but they also seemed more happy to accept social touch, as seen from the heat maps. The results seem to point at 2 different directions. For a bit of comparison, we see a similar trend in the Anglo-American cohort, where people's attitude towards social touch were negative from the questionnaires, but the heat maps show they're more comfortable with social touch nonetheless. The Germanic and Hispanic cohort, on the other hand, received and desired a lot more social touch, but showed no difference in the heat maps. The Slavic cohort showed no strong pattern in other tasks one way or the other, but had negative results in the heat maps. So what's going on here? We're still trying to find out. At this stage, it is still difficult for us to isolate the effect of the Chinese culture and the differences resulting from being at a different stage of the pandemic. But we do intend our study to be a longitudinal one, and we want to track how quarantine and social distancing affect people over the course of the pandemic. For example, we know the Chinese cohort desired a lot less touch in comparison to the other groups. We don't know, however, if they still desired more touch relative to themselves at a different point in time. We also definitely want to look into why the results from the Chinese cohort seem to point at two different directions. For example, the longer isolation periods and longer time they had to adjust to the new reality of the pandemic may have affected their ability to imagine social touch, their longing for touch, or perhaps they perceive affective touch and social contact to be less of a way of socializing, but more as a means to spread the disease. We will do our best to find our answers to these questions in our follow-up studies and give you updates when we could. Again, thank you very much for listening and for taking part in this conference.